I knew something was wrong with the house before we even finished unloading the boxes. But when you're a mother trying to start over, you learn to ignore instincts that don't come with proof. My name is Maria. I'm 34, and after everything that forced us out of our previous place, stability mattered more than comfort. The terrace house stood on a narrow street lined with buildings so old they leaned slightly toward each other, as if sharing secrets. Brick facade, narrow windows, 3 floors, and an attic that the agent barely mentioned, calling it unused storage. The rent was low for the area, suspiciously low, but the neighborhood was quiet, historic, and close to the boys' school. Billy and Bob, both teenagers, both old enough to sense when adults lie to themselves. They didn't complain, but I noticed how Billy kept staring at the upper windows and how Bob refused to go inside alone the first night. The house smelled of dust and old wood, not rot, just age, like something that had been sealed for a long time. Floors creaked in a way that didn't match footsteps, more like a slow, settling breath. The first week passed without incident, if you ignore the sounds I convinced myself were pipes, the soft taps that came from above long after midnight, always from the attic. I told myself it was temperature change, wood expanding. Old houses do that, everyone knows that. The boys shared the second-floor bedroom directly under the attic. On the 8th night, Bob came into my room holding something in his palm, his face pale in the low hallway light. It looked like fine sawdust. He said it had fallen onto his pillow while he was lying awake. I brushed it off, literally and emotionally, told him it was probably insulation or debris from renovation decades ago. Billy didn't say anything, but the next morning I found the same powder scattered along the edge of their ceiling, clinging to the light fixture like it had drifted down slowly, deliberately. Over the next days it kept happening, always at night, always directly above their beds. The sounds from the attic changed too, no longer random knocks or pops, but something closer to movement, a dragging scrape followed by brief stillness, as if whatever was up there paused to listen. The boys started sleeping with the lights on. Billy searched forums about animals in attics, rats, raccoons, birds, but nothing matched the weight of the steps we heard or the way the dust fell in thin lines instead of piles. One night I stood in the hallway and listened, really listened, and realized the steps followed a pattern, slow, measured, pacing back and forth exactly over the boys' room. The attic door was at the top of a narrow staircase behind the bathroom, sealed shut with a simple latch. When I opened it, the smell hit first. Not decay, not mold, but dry wood and something metallic underneath. The light switch didn't work. My phone flashlight barely cut through the darkness, revealing exposed beams, old boxes, and a floor layered with dust so undisturbed it looked like snow, except for the footprints. Bare, elongated impressions pressed deep into the dust, leading from the far corner straight to the area above the boys' room, then stopping abruptly, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. I backed out without calling the boys, locked the door, and told myself I would deal with it in the morning, that fear was contagious and I couldn't afford to spread it. That night, the scraping started earlier than usual. The dust fell heavier, pattering softly onto the ceiling like rain trapped indoors. Bob started crying. Billy held a baseball bat he'd brought up without asking, and as I stood between their beds trying to calm them, I realized the sound above us wasn't walking anymore. It was crawling. If you want to know what we found in that attic and why this house never really let us leave, subscribe now, because this was only the beginning. By the next morning, the house felt different. Not louder or darker, just attentive, as if it had noticed that we had noticed it. I barely slept, sitting upright in a chair between the boys' beds, listening to the silence that followed the crawling sounds, a silence so thick it felt deliberate. When daylight finally came, it didn't bring relief. Sunlight exposed the dust more clearly, thin trails running like veins along the ceiling plaster, concentrated in a precise rectangle that matched the attic floor above. Billy pointed it out without speaking, his finger tracing the shape slowly, while Bob watched the ceiling as if expecting it to break open. I tried to be practical, because panic doesn't feed children, But every explanation I formed fell apart the moment I said it out loud. Animals don't pace in straight lines. Old wood doesn't crawl, and dust doesn't fall with intent. We spent the day searching the house from bottom to top, opening every cabinet, every crawl space, every forgotten corner, as if the answer might be hiding somewhere easier than the attic. The walls felt thinner the higher we went, the air warmer, heavier, like the house was compressing around us. Every step on the stairs echoed too long. When we reached the bathroom door that concealed the attic staircase, Bob stopped walking. He said the air felt wrong there, like standing too close to something breathing. Billy laughed it off, but his laugh cracked halfway through, and he stepped back too. We argued quietly, not about whether something was up there anymore, but about who was going to face it. I told them I would handle it, because that's what mothers say even when their hands are shaking. Billy insisted on coming with me, said he wasn't a kid, said he wasn't letting me go up there alone. Bob stayed behind, sitting on his bed with his knees pulled to his chest, watching the ceiling as if it might answer him back. We waited until afternoon, because fear feels smaller when the sun is still out, even if it's lying. I grabbed a flashlight, a broom handle, anything that could double as reassurance, and slowly unlatched the attic door. The stairs creaked under our weight, each step announcing us in a way that felt like warning. At the top, the attic greeted us with that same dry, metallic smell, stronger now, sharper, as if something had been disturbed simply by our intention to enter. The dust on the floor was no longer smooth. Lines crossed it in erratic patterns, overlapping, circling, stopping abruptly, starting again, like someone had spent the night walking in thought, not wandering, but considering. Billy whispered that it looked like writing, then stopped himself, as if saying it fully might make it true. We moved slowly, sweeping the flashlight beam across the beams, the boxes, the dark corners that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. Every sound we made felt amplified, our breathing too loud, our footsteps intrusive. Halfway across the attic, the beam caught something that didn't belong. Scratches carved into the wooden beam directly above the boy's room, deep, uneven, as if made by fingers instead of tools. They weren't random. They repeated, same length, same spacing, dozens of times, layered on top of each other. Billy reached out to touch them, then pulled his hand back as if burned. That was when we heard it again, not above us this time, but around us, a low, shifting sound, like fabric dragged slowly across wood. The attic floor vibrated faintly, just enough to feel through the soles of my feet. The sound moved away from us, toward the far corner where the ceiling dipped lowest, where old boxes had been stacked and forgotten. Something about the way it retreated felt intentional, like it wanted us to follow. I should have turned back then. I should have grabbed Billy and gone downstairs and never come back up. But curiosity has a voice, and it sounds a lot like responsibility when you're a parent. We followed the sound. As we got closer, the air cooled suddenly, sharp enough to raise goosebumps. The dust grew thinner, disturbed, swept aside in long arcs, revealing the bare wood beneath. And then we saw the space where the floorboards had been worn down, smoothed by repeated contact, as if something had spent a long time in that exact spot. Billy whispered my name, not loud enough to echo, but full of a fear he was trying to hide. The sound stopped completely. No movement, no breathing, no settling wood, just stillness, a waiting stillness. I raised the flashlight higher, aiming into the darkest corner, and for a moment I thought I saw a shape withdraw deeper into shadow, tall, narrow, bending where no beam should bend. The light flickered. Billy grabbed my arm. Behind us, from directly below our feet, came a soft knock from the ceiling of the boys' room. One, then another, then a slow, dragging sound, beginning again. Whatever was up there wasn't hiding from us anymore. It was repositioning. We didn't go back into the attic that night, but none of us truly left it either. The house carried it with us, the awareness, the certainty that something above the ceiling was listening to every word, every breath, every thought we tried to keep quiet. We sat together in the living room with the lights on long past midnight, The boys wrapped in blankets they didn't need. The television muted because any sound that wasn't ours felt intrusive. The question was no longer if something was hiding there, but why it was still there, and what it wanted badly enough to announce itself. Billy was the first to say it out loud, his voice shaking despite the firmness he tried to force into it. "If we don't make it leave, we will have to." Bob nodded immediately, eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if expecting dust to fall again at any moment. I felt the weight of the decision settle in my chest, heavy and suffocating. This house was supposed to be a refuge, a reset, not another thing we would run from. We argued in low voices, not about fear, but about strategy, like people planning against something that could hear them thinking. Billy said we needed to know what it was protecting, because creatures don't haunt empty spaces without reason. Bob said maybe it wasn't protecting anything. Maybe it was trapped. That idea made the room feel colder. The attic boxes came up again, the ones stacked in the far corner, old enough to be ignored by time, but not by whatever paced above us. They were the only constant in that space, besides the scratches and the dust. By morning, the decision was made without ceremony. We would go back up together, in daylight, and we would open every box until we understood what had drawn it there. If we did understand that, maybe we could make it leave, or at least know when to leave ourselves. The attic felt heavier when we returned, like it remembered us. The air was stale, thick with that metallic edge that scraped the back of the throat. The scratches on the beams looked deeper in daylight, angrier, and the worn patch of floor seemed wider, smoother, polished by something patient. The boxes were stacked unevenly, some collapsing inward from age, others sealed tight with brittle tape and rusted nails. We worked slowly, deliberately, each movement cautious, listening for any sound that wasn't ours. The first boxes held nothing but old clothes, yellowed newspapers, broken furniture parts, the leftovers of lives that weren't ours. Dust coated everything, clinging to our skin, our hair, our lungs. Then Billy pried open a crate near the back, heavier than the rest, its wood darkened with age and something else, a faint stain that looked almost like dried spill marks. Inside, nestled in rotting straw, were bottles, 6 of them. Thick glass, dark, uneven, sealed with wax that had cracked but not broken. They looked wrong in the attic, too deliberate, too preserved. The labels were barely legible, handwritten ink faded to brown, but the words were still there, naming a vineyard, a farm somewhere rural and distant, a year so old it made my stomach tighten. This wasn't forgotten storage, this was hidden. Bob whispered that they smelled strange, not like wine, not like vinegar, but something sweet underneath, something that reminded him of the metallic scent we'd noticed since moving in. As if answering him, the attic creaked softly, a long groan from above the beams, followed by a slow scrape that made the hair on my arms rise. The sound circled us, not frantic, not aggressive, but focused. Billy said it quietly, almost reverently. It's been looking for these. The realization settled over us like a fog. The scratches, the pacing, the dust falling directly above the boys' beds, all centered beneath this exact spot. Whatever was up there had been searching, night after night, wearing the floor down, marking the beams, listening to see if the house would give up what it was hiding. Bob asked why it didn't just take them, his voice barely steady. I didn't have an answer that made sense. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe it needed us to find them. The thought made my chest tighten. The sound returned, closer now, no longer retreating into the corner, but circling the boxes, tracing our movements with unsettling precision. The light flickered again, just once, enough to cast shadows that stretched too long across the attic floor. In that flicker, I saw something shift near the low ceiling, a silhouette bending where no body should bend, retreating as the light steadied. Billy grabbed one of the bottles instinctively, then froze, as if afraid even touching it might trigger something irreversible. The attic went silent again, not empty, not calm, but coiled, waiting. I realized then that whatever lived above us wasn't just haunting the house, it was bound to those bottles, to whatever history they carried. And now that we had uncovered them, the rules had changed. We weren't just occupants anymore, we were participants. Morning came with an unnatural calm, the kind that follows a storm you didn't see, but somehow survived. The house looked ordinary in daylight, almost apologetic, as if it wanted to convince us that the night before had been nothing more than exhaustion and imagination. But the boys didn't speak much, and neither did I, because we all felt it. Whatever had moved through the attic hadn't left, it had only changed position. After breakfast, driven by a need for answers that felt heavier than fear, I went door to door along the narrow terrace street.
The neighborhood was old, quiet, the kind of place where people watched from behind curtains instead of porches. Most neighbors smiled politely and said nothing useful until I reached the last house on the block, where an elderly woman stood half hidden behind her gate, eyes sharp despite her age. When I mentioned our address, her expression changed immediately. She didn't look surprised. She looked tired. She told me she'd lived there for over 40 years and had seen families come and go, always the same pattern. The house stayed closed for long stretches, dark and empty. Then someone new would arrive, hopeful, optimistic. And within 3 months, sometimes less, they would leave. No furniture sales, no signs, just quiet departures. I asked her why. She said people complained about noises, about the attic, about feeling watched, but no one ever stayed long enough to explain more. She leaned closer and lowered her voice, telling me the house didn't like to be disturbed, that whatever was tied to it didn't forgive curiosity. I walked back home with her words pressing against my skull. 3 months. We hadn't even made it halfway. Inside, I told Billy and Bob everything. The fear in their faces wasn't panic anymore. It was resignation. They already knew what the decision was before I said it out loud. But I wasn't ready to run without trying one last thing. If the boxes, the wine, the history were anchors, then maybe removing them would break whatever held that thing here.
We carried the remaining crates down from the attic together, every step tense, expecting resistance, expecting the house to protest. It didn't. The silence followed us, dense and watchful. We stacked the boxes in the laundry room at the back of the house, a small, narrow space with no windows and a single exposed bulb that flickered no matter how often I changed it. The smell intensified immediately, metallic and sweet, filling the air until it felt hard to breathe. Night fell quickly, unnaturally fast, as if the house was eager for darkness. I told the boys to stay upstairs and lock their door. I told myself I would only check the boxes one last time, just to make sure nothing remained. When I reached the laundry room, the bulb flickered violently, plunging the space into shadow, then snapped back on. And there it was, standing between the washing machine and the stacked crates, crouched low but impossibly tall, its body blacker than the darkness around it, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Its eyes were huge, round, glowing yellow like diseased lanterns, fixed directly on me with a hunger that wasn't for food. It made a sound then, a wet, grinding noise that vibrated through my bones, as if its throat were lined with stone. I couldn't move. The thing shifted, dragging something heavy behind it, and I realized it had a tail, long and thick, scraping against the tile with a sound like tearing fabric.
For a moment that felt eternal, we stared at each other, the house holding its breath around us. Then it moved, not toward me, but past me, brushing close enough that the air went ice cold against my skin. It bolted for the stairs, its claws digging into wood, its tail slamming against the walls as it climbed with terrifying speed, disappearing back into the attic, into the place it had claimed as its own. The house erupted with sound, beams creaking, walls groaning, dust raining down as in protest. I screamed for the boys, and we ran. We didn't pack. We didn't look back. By the time we reached the street, the house was silent again, dark, empty, waiting for whoever came next. I understood then why no one stayed. Some places aren't meant to be homes. Some things don't leave when you ask them to. And some curiosities cost more than any fresh start is worth. We never went back. And sometimes, when I wake up at night, I still hear that scraping sound in my memory, pacing, searching, waiting for someone else to open the door again. We left before sunrise, carrying nothing that couldn't be replaced, because every object from that house felt contaminated by memory. The street was empty, quiet in the way only old neighborhoods are when they pretend nothing ever happens there.
As we walked away, I looked back once, just once, and saw movement behind the attic window, a slow shifting shadow that withdrew the moment it realized it had been seen. The house didn't fight our departure.
It didn't chase us. It didn't need to. Whatever lived there had already learned enough. In the days that followed, the boys stopped asking questions, not because they weren't curious, but because curiosity felt dangerous now. Bob started sleeping with the light on wherever we stayed, and Billy refused to talk about attics, ceilings, or old houses. As for me, I learned something I wish I hadn't. Some places are not abandoned, they are patient. And some things don't haunt houses because they are trapped, but because they are waiting for someone to notice what they're guarding. Weeks later, I drove past the old terrace street once, against my better judgment. The house was closed again, curtains drawn, the door freshly painted, as if preparing for someone new. A moving truck stood at the corner. I didn't stop. I didn't warn anyone, because I understood then that the house doesn't listen to warnings, only to footsteps, only to curiosity, only to those who believe they deserve a fresh start more than they deserve safety. And somewhere above that ceiling, something is still pacing, counting time, waiting for the next family to look up and ask what's making that sound. If this story kept you watching until the end, don't forget to like, comment what you think was really living in that attic, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one.